As the Emperor protects, so must we.
The Astra Militarum Regiment, known as the Tanith First-and-Only, officially called the Tanith First Regiment but better known as Gaunt's Ghosts, was raised from the heavily forested frontier world of Tanith in the Sabbat World sector. The regiment is primarily deployed to campaigns in the Segmentum Pacificus and the Segmentum Solar, and is known to be highly skilled at infiltration missions and to be home to some of the greatest marksmen in the Astra Militarum. The regiment has been heavily engaged in the combat to retake the Sabbat Worlds from the forces of chaos during the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. The regiment's nickname originally came about as a result of the name of their commanding officer, Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt, and the disenfranchised status of the original Tanith soldiers after their homeworld was destroyed. It has proved to be a nickname of some further application, as the Vergastite personnel influx into the regiment also considered themselves ghosts due to the destruction of their home city, and the regiment as a whole is noted for its stealth and reconnaissance abilities being almost uncanny in nature. The forest world of Tanith was destroyed shortly after the initial founding of the planet's first 3 Astra Militarum regiments. The only survivors to escape the attack, the Tanith First, carry with them the wilderness skills learnt on their homeworld, making them a superb light infantry regiment. The guardsmen of the Tanith First-and-Only wear distinctive camo cloaks and are renowned for their expertise in both scouting and reconnaissance in force missions. In addition to their normal equipment, each guardsman is armed with a straight silver war knife, unique to the Tanith regiment. Despite their limited numbers, the courageous if uncultured soldiers of the First and Only have been instrumental in multiple battles throughout the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. Led by the inspirational Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt and drawing new recruits from the worlds they fight to liberate and defend, the reputation of Gaunt's Ghosts continues to grow with each passing deployment. If the Imperial Guard is the so-called Hammer of the Emperor, the famed regiment known as Gaunt's Ghosts finds more in common with the medical scalpel: small, fragile, but incredibly deadly when employed correctly. Its founding coincides with the complete destruction of the heavily forested world of Tanith, and this single regiment and its troops contain the last living memories and traces of their world. Highly skilled in special operations, the Tanith First-and-Only display exemplary small unit tactics, brilliant leadership, precise marksmanship, and uncanny stealth skills. All of these abilities were integral to their many achievements during their time of service as part of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, a hard-fought effort to reclaim the worlds in the Segmentum Pacificus that bear that Imperial Saint's name from the forces of chaos. Whether dispatched on unsanctioned missions comprising a handful of their more veteran soldiers or stalking along vast war fronts in their thousands, the men and women of the Tanith First are expert shots and deadly hand-to-hand combatants. Many are known to sport spiral tattoos, and the wild appearance of their soldiers and officers, coupled with the lack of an enforced uniform, has led many to dismiss them as a worldless, undisciplined rabble. Those who know them better are grateful for their presence in any war zone. Until the events that forged the Tanith First-and-Only, the forest world of Tanith most notably exported the exceptional Nullwood, and otherwise went unnoticed amongst the numberless planets of the Imperium. Colonel-Commissar Gaunt arrived to take charge of his troops just in time for disaster to strike Tanith. A splinter Chaos war fleet, fleeing from an Imperial victory, descended upon Tanith. Faced with a horrible choice of deploying his unseasoned troops in a hopeless defense of their homeworld or salvaging what he could, Gaunt chose to withdraw, and the new regiment escaped with just enough time to watch the Chaos warships utterly annihilate their planet from orbit. Despite the trauma of losing their entire homeworld, the Tanith very quickly saw their first action on the fields of war. The Tanith were tested on brutal battlefields on Blackshard, Bucephalon, Fortis Binary, and other worlds in the Sabbat World sector. Each time, they acquitted themselves well despite terrible foes and staggering odds, using their specialist skills to pull victories from the jaws of apparent defeat on numerous occasions. Alongside their successes, the Ghost's behavior managed to earn them a number of enemies amongst the other Imperial forces of the Sabbat World's crusade, including the Volpone Bluebloods and Jantine Patricians. The Ghost negotiated these trials and tribulations, facing threats internal and external, and continued to survive to serve the God Emperor thanks to their incredible stealth skills and the heroism of leadership figures such as Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt, Colonel Calm Corbeck, and Major Elim Ron. Of their many engagements during the Sabbat World's crusade, those on the worlds of Menazoid Epizilon and Vergast stand in particular note in the Ghost's battle records. On the former, the regiment contended with a plot devised by a rogue inquisitor and a Lord General to seize control of the crusade, facing a corrupted horror from the age of technology in the process. On Vergast, the Tanith helped defend the manufactoria of Vervunhive, and in the wake of the battle, drew a large group of reinforcements from the ruined Hive city. Later in the campaign, the Tanith First-and-Only received more external recruits, this time from the Belladon 81st Reconnaissance Regiment, which had also suffered losses that put it beneath optimal strength. Over time, the three elements grew into a single, cohesive regiment, not in spite of their diversity, but because of it. Over the course of the crusade, the Tanith would again and again play a pivotal role in thwarting conspiracies, vanquishing foul servants of chaos, and safeguarding the Imperium of Man. From planet to planet and from victory to narrow victory, the Tanith First-and-Only's history travels a long, blood-soaked path of service and sacrifice alongside the Sabbat World's crusade. Originally, there were 3 Tanith regiments raised for the Astra Militarum from that forest world in the 10th standard years of the Sabbat World's crusade. The Tanith First, Second, and Third, 6,000 troops, and a small number of vehicles and artillery pieces. The majority of the troops who joined were Tanith militiamen, although some former criminals were present, and it can be assumed that other non-military members of the population were included. The soldiers were originally organized into 3 2,000-troop regiments, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of Tanith. A small number of artillery and armor units were also created, although they were intended for supporting roles for what was at its heart intended to be an infantry force. Following the reformation of the Hirkin 8th, the highly experienced Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt was assigned to lead the 3 new regiments. When Gaunt arrived at Tanith to oversee the founding of these regiments, he was not impressed by the appearance of the troops, initially describing them as a scrawny, scruffy mob of soft-voiced woodsmen. His opinion of them changed quickly after seeing them in combat. Soon after his arrival, Gaunt impatiently ordered the regiments to begin boarding the troop carriers that would take them to the troop transports in orbit, waiting to ferry them through the warp to their first war zones. A fortunate move which got enough of the regiment's men off-world before a Chaos Warfleet scattered from the recent Imperial victory at Balho managed to evade the Imperial Navy picket and head towards Tanith. Gaunt decided to abandon the world, trying to salvage as many fighting troops in the process instead of wasting them all in a heroic but impossible effort to hold Tanith. The regiments were hastily loaded onto troop transports and shuttled to carrier ships in orbit, but the Chaos attack occurred earlier than predicted. Gaunt survived, being one of the last members of the regiment to make it off-planet, and he reorganized the survivors into a single infantry regiment, the Tanith First, soon also known as the First-and-Only. Gaunt confirmed after leaving Tanith that his quick actions had salvaged 3,500 troops of the original 3 regiments and the majority of their equipment. The vast majority of the heavy equipment, along with the regiment's entire officer corps, was lost when the forces of chaos made planetfall. It is unclear which of the original 3 regiments actually were saved from the fires of Tanith, but the remaining troops, regardless of their original assignments, were reformed into the Tanith First. On the regiment's first battlefield on the world of Blackshard, the Tanith Guardsman Mad Hlane Larkin coined the nickname Gaunt's Ghosts. The use of the nickname Ghosts had a dual meaning. The first is that Gaunt's decision to abandon Tanith made ghosts of them, the regiment, hollow echoes. The second is that because of their exceptional stealth and scouting skills, the regiment's troops were ghost-like on the battlefield. The Tanith First excels at reconnaissance work as the Tanith never get lost, and using camo cloaks they can move quickly and stealthily through most types of terrain. The Ghosts eventually garnered a strong reputation after a number of actions during the Sabbat World's Crusade, in particular the defenses of Vervunhiv, the Beatis Shrine on Hagia, and the defense of the apparent actual reincarnated person of Saint Sabbat herself on Herodor. Unfortunately, these successes did not come without its drawbacks, and the Ghosts suffered heavy casualties on a number of occasions. However, 2 large personnel intakes during the regiment's history, one from the citizenry of Vervunhiv, the other from combination with the 81st Belladon Recon Regiment, managed to offset these losses. The Tanith First-and-Only are best known for their participation in the Imperium's Sabbat World's Crusade against the forces of chaos in the Sabbat World sector, which began in 755. M41. During the Crusade, the Ghost's expertise in covert operations was instrumental in the liberation of a number of worlds. However, rivalries with other, more illustrious Astra Militarum regiments, in particular the Jantine Patricians and the Volpone Blue Bloods, often put the Ghost at risk. The regiment took heavy losses in its early actions, including the loss of 300 guardsmen during a friendly fire incident at Voltus Watergate. Heavy casualties were also incurred during the effort to recapture the Adeptus Mechanicus's Forge world of Fortis Binary, so much so that by the time of the Ghost deployment on Monthax, they numbered only 1,500 guardsmen. The casualties taken at Monthax and later the Hive world of Vergast were replaced by recruits taken from the destroyed Vervunhiv, at which time female soldiers first joined the Tanith. After Tanith was destroyed by the attack of the Chaos Warfleet, the Tanith First-and-Only had no homeworld from which to draw new recruits to replace losses. Instead, new ghosts were adopted into the regiment as the crusade progressed. The regiment took heavy losses in its early actions, including the loss of 300 troops during a friendly fire incident on Voltamand. At the end of the siege of Vervunhiv, the Hive city was left in ruins, and the disillusioned citizens of Vergast were given the opportunity to join the Imperial Guard under the Act of Consolation. This resulted in an influx of Vergastite soldiers into the Tanith First, which brought the first females into the regiment. Several of these women became some of the regiment's best snipers. The soldiers from Vervunhiv used a different badge on their caps to represent the regiment, adorned with the axe rake that Vervunhivers used in mining before their hive city was destroyed. Heavy casualties were also incurred during the effort to recapture the Forge world of Fortis Binary, so much so that by the time of the Ghost's deployment on Monthax, they numbered less than 2,000 guardsmen. 10 Terran years after the regiment was first raised, the Tanith had been involved in numerous campaigns for the Sabbat World's Crusade. After Colonel Gaunt and some hand-picked Tanith specialists were dispatched on a suicidal mission to Geryon, a world held by the forces of chaos, the Ghosts were merged with another reconnaissance regiment, the 81st Belladon, to form the 81 Saint/1 Saint Recon Regiment under the command of Colonel Lucian Wilder. 18 solar months after making planetfall on Geryon, Gaunt's mission team was retrieved by Crusade forces. After inquisitorial scrutiny, the team members were sent back to the newly formed 81 Saint/1 Saint Regiment, while Gaunt himself was stripped of command rank and sent to be the senior political officer of the Fortis Binars, serving at Sparshed Mons. Shortly after taking his position with the Binars, Gaunt began to suspect that the potentially sacred sites or Mons that the Imperial Guard was fighting over might actually be Chaos artifacts. With evidence mounting, he contacted his Geryon team and determined that the artifacts were, in fact, enormous Chaos traps. Gaunt was eventually reunited with his ghosts, and his evidence prompted the withdrawal of the Imperial forces from the Mons. Caught in a desperate rearguard action, and with time counting down to an orbital bombardment by the Imperial Navy, Gaunt's ghosts were hard-pressed to escape utter destruction. Only the valiant sacrifice of Colonel Wilder, the 81 Saint/1 Saint Regiment's new commander, his commissar, and the Belladon 1st Company allowed the 81 Saint/1 seat as a whole to escape. Following his actions, Gaunt was again granted command of the Tanith, along with their Vergastite and Belladon compatriots. It is worth noting that following the merger with the 81st Belladon, the Tanith First's organizational structure changed. Companies using alphabetical call signs replaced the previous numerical platoons. The regiment was reorganized so that the Tanith, Vergastites, and Belladons were fully integrated with each other within the regiment. Additionally, each group of men and women was represented by an officer directly below Gaunt: Major Ron of Tanith, Major Kalia of Vergast, and Major Baskerville of Belladon. Following the reorganization, Gaunt led the newly reformed unit to help liberate the now chaos-held world of Geryon. The troops of the Tanith First are unparalleled scouts, marksmen, masters of stealth tactics, and excellent light infantry, and are said to possess an unerring sense of direction, traits developed for survival on a planet where the forests actually move to conceal the path taken. The ongoing military conflict in which Gaunt's ghosts served was the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, a vast effort by the Imperium of Man to retake worlds lost to worshippers of chaos in the Sabbat World sector of the Segmentum Pacificus. The Tanith First-and-Only joined the crusade, which began in 755, M41, shortly after their escape from their doomed homeworld. Though they were frequently overshadowed by more decorated regiments, Gaunt's ghosts were nonetheless instrumental in many key operations, frequently using their unique skills to execute dangerous covert operations. Since its founding, the Tanith First-and-Only has served in the following campaigns and war zones, in approximate chronological order: Blackshard, Voltimand, Ramillies 268, 43, Connemara, Bucephalon, Typhon VIII, Caligula, Macedon, Spurtus Ellipse, Fortis Binary, Pyrites, Menazoid Epsilon, Oscray Hive, Sapientia, Monthax, Vergast. The campaign on Vergast was one of the more notable engagements Gaunt's ghosts took part in. The regiment's time on Vergast saw them defending the hive city of Vervenhive from their chaos-corrupted rivals in the neighboring hive of Pharazoica. Following the destruction of the Chaos forces and Vervenhive's subsequent dissolution, many of the natives of Vergast who had fought alongside the ghosts as part of the Scratch Companies formally joined the regiment. Hagia. On Hagia, the sacred homeworld of Saint Sabbat herself, Gaunt's ghosts nearly found themselves disbanded after a trap sprung by the forces of chaos resulted in the destruction of the planet's Doctrinopolis, signaling a massive chaotic retaliation war fleet to move in on the world in the process. Assigned to retrieve the sacred remains of the saint from her mountain tomb, the regiment was able to both fend off a massive assault by the Infardi chaos cultists of Pater Sin and activate the powerful psychic device in the saint's tomb, which scattered the incoming chaos warfleet through the warp, and ultimately saved the planet from invasion and conquest by the servants of the ruinous powers. Fantine. On the world of Fantine, a number of Gaunt's ghosts took part in Operation Laricelle, an airborne operation that deployed specially selected fire teams into the city of Urenberg to seek out and assassinate Sagittar Slaith, the Chaos warlord in command of the Blood Pact forces holding the city. This mission took place at the same time as the main Imperial assault on the world in which the rest of the Tanith First was deployed. Ex-Cardinal, deployed as part of a brigade strength force to the planet of Ex-Cardinal, the ghosts quickly became embroiled in the brutal trench warfare that had defined the local defense. This was also the first conflict which the ghosts did not help end decisively. While they made some gains against the chaos-corrupted Shattuck Republic, they were ordered to take ship for Herodor, even as the war on Iexi continued to rage on. Herodor. When the recently resurrected Saint Sabbat asked that the First-and-Only serve as her bodyguards, the ghosts found themselves embroiled in a brutal city fight against a massive chaos host, attempting to kill her and thus shatter the morale of the Imperial Crusade in the Sabbat worlds. Ultimately, the regiment was victorious, fending off both the armies of the Blood Pact and 9 assassins serving chaos to protect the saint, allowing her to kill the Chaos Magister Innocenti. With this victory, the Chaos Archon Urlach Gower lost one of his greatest lieutenants, and the Crusade was able to take the fortress world of Morland and open up a second front in the Crusade against the forces of chaos in the Sabbat worlds. It should be noted that it was on Herodor that Colonel Colm Corbeck fell, shot and killed by the chaos-corrupted Vergastite Lijaku, who had been a member of the regiment. Ancrion Sextus, the Tanith First Regiment, was deployed to Ancrion Sextus as part of the Belladon 81st Reconnaissance Regiment, whilst Gaunt's team was pursuing its own mission on Geryon. The key battle zones on that world were a series of massive, compartmentalized steppe cities, which were in reality gateways linked to the realm of chaos. Upon discovering the true nature of the steppe cities as a result of the efforts of Gaunt and the Geryon 12, the Imperial forces abandoned their bloody siege work and destroyed them using an orbital bombardment, which annihilated significant numbers of the enemy and evaded the trap set for the Imperials by the forces of chaos. Geryon, first visited by a hand-picked team led by Gaunt to assassinate the Imperial Guard traitor general Noshes Sturm. That team would return with the rest of the regiment in the later Imperial liberation of Geryon from the forces of chaos. Jago. The 1st Tanith Regiment suffered upwards of 50% casualties on Jago, while defending the right flank of the larger Imperial Sabbat World's Crusade army from an assault by the Gorses of Chaos. Balho. While on shore leave on Balho, elements of the 1st Tanith Regiment fought off a Blood Pact death squad that had been sent to assassinate Mabon Edogar, a former Blood Pact officer who had defected to the Imperial side in the Sabbat World's Crusade, before he could reveal any useful intelligence to the Imperial military. Salvation's Reach. The Tanith First-and-Only have been away from the front line for too long. Listless and hungry for action, they are offered a mission that perfectly suits their talents. The objective, the mysterious Salvation's Reach, a remote and impenetrable stronghold concealing secrets that could change the course of the Sabbat World's crusade. But the proposed raid is so hazardous, it is regarded as a suicide mission, and Gaunt's ghosts may have been in reserve for so long they have lost their edge. Haunted by specters from the past and stalked by the forces of chaos, Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt and his ghosts embark upon what could be their finest hour, or their final mission. The troopers of the Tanith First are unparalleled scouts, marksmen, masters of stealth tactics, and excellent light infantry. They are said to possess an unerring sense of direction, traits developed for survival on a planet where the forests actually move to conceal the path taken. The Vergastite and Belladon members of the regiment claim no such uncanny abilities, but are also proven light infantry specialists, with Vergastite hive city backgrounds in particular complementing the talents of the Tanith woodsmen. The First and Only excels in stealth infiltration missions, but has proven particularly tenacious in defensive operations in urban terrain. Even amongst such light infiltration infantry as the Tanith, there is always room for the truly elite. In the Ghosts, these take on two forms: the aptly named Scouts, led by McColl, who specialize in reconnaissance and covert operations, and the Sniper Division. There tends to be an over-representation of Vergastites excelling as snipers, while the Tanith natives dominate in the Scouts. The overall organization of the Tanith First and Only is flexible, as its numbers have shifted drastically over its history. However, the regiment is typically divided into several companies and further subdivided into individual squads. Unlike some other regiments, much of the responsibility for battlefield decisions falls onto the sergeant of a given squad and his or her second-in-command who holds the rank of corporal. The exact makeup of the squad can vary given the mission, but Tanith squads often feature troopers with roles and titles such as Scout, Dedicated Marksman, Heavy Weapons Team, such as Missile Launcher or Heavy Stubber Teams, Corpsman, Flamer, and Voxman. As squads reconsolidate after losses, this makeup alters depending on availability. In general, however, the Tanith attempt to maintain balanced squads that can handle the diverse threats the galaxy has to offer. In contrast to some other, more rigidly structured Astra Militarum regiments, the Tanith first gives an extraordinary amount of freedom to individual squads. While the colonel and company commanders still issue orders, squad leaders receive considerable leeway on how to accomplish objectives. The Tanith First and Only frequently leverages its combination of small unit tactics, independent squads, and tight communication network to outmaneuver the opponent. This allows them to be extremely fluid on the battlefield, reacting to the enemy much faster than they could otherwise. Even squads are modular and often break down into two smaller fire teams, the second led by the squad's corporal, granting them an even greater degree of tactical flexibility. During his period of command in the regiment's formative years, Ibram Gaunt placed a great deal of importance on his officers having a grasp of the overall tactical situation. It is said that on several occasions he even broke mission protocol to give other officers information and maps that the Sabbat Crusade's High Command had deemed too sensitive for the lower ranks to access. The Tanith's self-awareness of the regiment's strengths allows them to exploit these advantages to the fullest extent possible. Tanith troopers' weapons of choice are almost invariably stealth, mobility, and coordination rather than brute force and overwhelming firepower. The Ghosts favor in particular the Long Las, the lightweight missile launchers they affectionately refer to as tread feathers, explosive tube charges, and backpack flamers alongside controlled and precise lasgun fire. And as a last resort, the Tanith are trained to use their signature silver war knives to deadly effect in close quarters. Some of their most skilled melee combatants are even whispered to have faced down Chaos Space Marines in personal combat and survived to tell the tale of crossing blades with those terrifying foes. The Tanith uniform is black, with optional helmets for standard troopers and forage caps for the regiment's elite scout platoon. Camo cloaks, made of the special synthetic material called camellia line, are standard issue. The cloaks automatically change their color depending on the location of the wearer. Every soldier has a long, double-edged bayonet combat blade the Tanith call straight silver. Their favored special weapons include long-las sniper rifles, flamethrowers, and portable missile launchers the Tanith nickname tread feathers. The cap badge for the Tanith is a wreath-surrounded skull with 3 daggers behind it, each dagger representing one of the original Tanith regiments. On the badge is the inscription, for Tanith, for the Emperor. After the destruction of the Tanith, 2nd and 3rd Regiments, the Tanith snapped off the 2 outside daggers on their cap badges. The Vergastite cap badge is an axe rake to symbolize their former hive city's mining and industrial background. These pins and other badges that indicate rank or specialization are dulled down with soot or bootblack to aid in stealth operations. The native-born Tanith can be generally identified by their pale skin, which contrasts with their dark hair and blue tattoos. Virtually every Tanith possesses a visible tattoo, although the number, design, size, and complexity varies wildly between individuals. They come from a wide variety of backgrounds, as one would expect from a regiment drawn from the entirety of a forest world. They share exceptional abilities at stealth, as a standard ghost matches or exceeds a scout specialist from any other regiment. Almost every Tanith boasts an impressive, innate sense of direction, as the moving forests of their world made navigation via landmarks useless. If all practical observation is to be trusted, a native-born Tanith can never be lost, and of course, the most powerful unifying force lies in the loss of their homeworld. Every Tanith experienced the incomparable memory of seeing their home, and everyone they knew utterly annihilated by chaos. Unlike most other guardsmen, a Tanith cannot even dream of returning home someday, and must fight knowing that when they die, so too die some of the last memories of Tanith. Despite the potential for despair at the loss of their home, this event proved more of a catalyst than a death knell. The Tanith hold an absolute conviction to make the most of their lives, and carry a burning desire for vengeance against chaos that allows them to take on seemingly suicidal missions with hardly a second thought. Despite the pall of tragedy that always lies near a Tanith's thoughts, they maintain a surprisingly jovial attitude when not in combat. The Ghosts also boast an incredibly clean record compared to most Astra Militarum regiments, and rarely merit serious disciplinary action. Although the usual collection of low-grade misconduct and misdemeanors can be found, its officers rarely need to enforce corporal or lethal punishment. Because of this peculiarity, some other Astra Militarum regiments wrongly view the Tanith as primitive, unruly barbarians rather than the highly skilled special operations unit they truly are. Unlike the members of the First-and-Only who hail from Tanith, the Vergastite element of the Ghosts comes from much more mixed stock and has few universal features, although many have adopted the traditional Tanith tattoos. Like the Tanith, they also share a burning hatred for chaos. Although their world is rebuilding, they too bear the scars from seeing their home hive city burn. Overall, the Vergastite elements have adopted Tanith practices and customs well, and although the Vergastite are less skilled at stealth work than the original Tanith, they bring many skilled sharpshooters to the regiment. Unlike the other 2 elements of the Ghosts, the Belladon are not united by a shared loss of their home. They also claim a long and proud martial history, unlike the first-generation Tanith and Vergastite troops. Though they are an integrated part of the Tanith First-and-Only, the Belladon maintain a strong regimental identity and put a heavy emphasis on the legacy of their previous commander, Colonel Lucian Wilder, who briefly commanded the combined regiment in its early days and gave his life on Geryon to save it. The Belladon boast their own excellent scouts and have exchanged techniques and practices that complement those of the native Tanith. Perhaps no single individual has been as responsible for the survival and success of the Tanith First as Colonel-Commissar Ibram Gaunt. Gaunt hailed from a family of soldiers, with a General Dercius as an uncle and a father who served as second-in-command to a regiment of the Jantine patricians. After his father's death, Gaunt received schooling at the Schola Progenium on the world of Ignatius Cardinal, where he specialized as a commissar. As a cadet, he served with the Hyrcan 8th Regiment under the tutelage of Commissar General Delane Akhtar and distinguished himself, receiving promotion to full commissar upon Oktar's death. During his attachment to the Hyrcan 8th, Gaunt gained the attention of Lord General Slado, becoming one of his inner circle. With Slado's promotion to War Master and his charge of an imperial crusade to retake the Sabbat worlds, Gaunt was amongst the chosen few with whom Slado swore a blood oath to see the crusade to its conclusion no matter what, in order to honor Saint Sabbat from whom the sector drew its name. In the following years, Gaunt performed incredible feats and received the extremely rare rank of Colonel-Commissar and his own command over the Tanith First for his loyalty and achievement. From that point on, Gaunt and his regiment, later nicknamed Gaunt's Ghosts, made their way from battlefield to battlefield, facing terrible foes and incredible challenges that tested them in every way, forging them into a deadly and renowned regiment. The Tanith First are noted as being adept at using the flamer and missile launcher, though the type of missile launcher they favor appears to be a cut-down rocket tube referred to informally as a tread feather, and also regularly deploy autocannons. In place of the standard issue Astra Militarum combat knives, the Tanith Regiment makes use of 30-centimeter-long, straight-edged, silver-plated daggers, known by the troopers as their straight silver, which is also the weapon that officers mean to use when they give the order to fix bayonets. The Tanith make use of Mark III laze guns. The Tanith troopers of the regiment wield laze guns with Nalwood stocks and furnishings, while the Vergastites use laze guns with fold-down wire stocks. Tanith snipers make use of needle-las, long-las sniper rifles and usually prefer the powerful single-fire hot-shot charge packs. For stealth purposes, the Tanith First Regiment's fatigues and combat armor are black and gray in color, and each trooper is also issued a camo cloak made from camellia line. As with any regiment, individual soldiers also have private stockpiles of trophy weapons claimed on the field of battle that they may use in a tight spot. And so, amidst the ashes of worlds, the saga of the Tanith First-and-Only echoes through the annals of the Imperium. They came from a dying world, forged in fire and tempered by loss. But through their courage, their tenacity, and their unbreakable spirit, they stood as a beacon of hope in the darkness of the far future. Though they may be gone, their legacy endures, inspiring future generations to rise against the encroaching tide of chaos. For as long as there are those who remember their sacrifice, the spirit of the Tanith First-and-Only will live on, immortalized in tales of heroism and valor.